dark chocolate, milk chocolate, hazelnut, shea butter, cocoa butter, peanut butter, caramel, and almond nut. These are the different shades of the men and women that live through generations of strength, humility, integrity, resilience, and tenacity. We are children of survivors, victors, heroes, the descendants of the African diaspora. Fula, Fulani, Bantu, Oromo, Nubia, Igbo, Ashanti, Yoruba, Zulu, Shona, Debele, just to name a few. I see you reflecting a mosaic of the different shades of the color brown, yet we're labeled as racist as one color black. I hear your footsteps marching down the streets like warriors, preparing for battle, and we are. I see you walking up the stairs, through the corridor, into offices, high cabinets in courtrooms, high tables in boardrooms, yet we still fight against unconscious and conscious biasness. But we still show up. We know they're not for us, but we still show up, even with our head wraps tied up. You see, trauma may have interrupted our history, but generational and collective trauma doesn't define all of our history, because we are the crushed and refined diamonds, the trees that grew from roots forced across oceans and seas, the flowers that bloom from broken seeds left to germinate in soil that our predecessors were forced to plow out with worn out hands. We overstand who we are. We're not just price tags outside of East India docks, sold off for stocks and shares to build their banks. We stand in high places and in superior ranks. We are the pearls that came in Windrush ships. We weren't just victims of cotton yards and sugarcane fields, lynched and forced to yield. We are survivors, heroes, victors. Look, Mansa Musa was the richest man that ever lived. Nelson Mandela was the president of South Africa. Winnie Mandela was an anti-apartheid activist. Marcus Garvey was an entrepreneur and an activist. Katherine Johnson was a mathematician behind NASA's mission to the moon. We are the next ancestors. We are our children's heroes. We are children of survivors.
It's man like Dan. Come on! Welcome to Melanated Proud. Today we've got a special guest. As you can see, a lovely poet beside me. But before we begin, just make sure you like that button, subscribe and share with your loved ones. So I'm going to get straight into this, innit? Because this is a very talented guest, but she's also a deep person, innit? So round of applause to yourself first. Ingrid, come on. Thanks for coming. But I want to ask you, like, what made you write that poem that you just shared?
I think what makes me write all my poetry is my thoughts. I was having this conversation actually on the way down, and it's like, it's my deepest thoughts. And I'm a deep thinker, as you said. So sometimes it's like, it helps to put it on pen and paper. And that's how I started writing poetry to begin with anyway. And it was my thoughts, my observations, my experiences, shared experiences from other people. And particularly this one as well was a narrative I wanted to challenge. And I found that, you know, Black people, we're constantly, not constantly, but at times, the way we're presented is that we're just victims. And we are, but that's not our only identity. I just feel like as Black people, we're kind of put in a situation where I wanted to challenge the narrative that we're not just victims, that we're victorious. And our history is not just we went through a bad thing and that was us, but to challenge that actually we were victorious. And even before our history was interrupted, we were victorious people. We were people, you know, of so much depth and substance. We're kings and queens. And that's what I wanted to put forward, that even now, that's who we are. We're not just victims. That's not our only identity.
So what does that poem specifically mean to you?
Exactly that I'm not just a victim. I'm not a victim of my skin tone. I'm not a victim of my circumstances. I'm not a victim of my history. But actually, I'm a victorious person, and I understand that we are the next ancestors. We are the next superheroes for our children and our children to come. And we get to decide, you know, what that looks like. When I think about historical figures that have achieved so much for our community as Black people, as our race, you know, overall, that's who we can be. We can just be as powerful, as influential as them, and our children are watching us. And I think that when they go out into the community, they go to schools, now there's social media, you know, the things that are portrayed on there can make them question that, is this what the trajectory looks like for me? Am I going to have a hard time at work? Am I going to have a hard time at school? Am I going to have a hard time going out just because of the color of my skin? Am I going to be racially profiled? Am I constantly going to have to fight against institutionalized racism? But actually, if we change that narrative, and I'm not saying that we haven't, but if we install the narrative that actually, no, I can be the next influential figure. When I go into school, yes, I face these difficulties, but I can rise above them because this is not just who I am. I can be the most top performing student. I can be the next president or whatever it is their aspirations are. And that's what Children of Survivors meant for me, was that I'm not just a child of somebody that went through a difficult time, but actually they survived that. And because they survived that, that's why we're here today in the first place. You know, yes, many people passed away and died, and in the most, you know, unfortunate circumstances, but that's just not us. And I feel like sometimes the way certain media outlets have portrayed us as, you know, like, I think about certain films, I don't want to mention the names of the films and everything like that, but I just think that when are we going to have a film, or plenty films, I'm not saying there isn't any out there, where we're not just victims, or actually we're doing really, really well and we're influential. That's just where it came from. And I'm not saying that's how everybody thought, but it was just the thoughts that I was having around that at that time. Yeah.
I'm feeling motivated, you know, like just listening to the reason why you wrote that poem. But when did you actually start writing poetry?
Oh man, when I was like maybe 14, 15. And it started off really like, I'm a thinker in it, and I would have all these thoughts in my head just flying around. Or like, let's say I'm feeling upset, but I'm a person, again, I was having this conversation on the way down, and I mentalize my feelings. So I don't just feel, I ask myself, why am I feeling like this? If I'm sad, I'll say like, okay, you're feeling sad, but why are you sad? And as I began to mentalize my feelings, sometimes I didn't know how to articulate them, so I'll write them down. And this is what I used to do when I was a young child. And then
wait, did anything happen like whilst you're young for you to suddenly go into?
It could just be the general stresses of life. It could be an argument with a sibling. It could be a difficult experience at school.
But what made you think, you know what, let me just write this down?
Because I really enjoyed English literature at school as well. Cool, yeah. So like, I was really inspired by the poetry that I would read at school, and how they put that together, and the linguistic techniques they used, the way they manipulated grammar, and it just inspired me. When the teacher used to talk about it, I was like, I really enjoy this. Like, I like, and obviously we had to study that in English literature, different poets and different books that they wrote, wrote. So I thought, why can't I do that? Why can't I express my?
Subject's still going, isn't it?
Why can't I? I've got an experience, or I've got a feeling. It's bugging me out. How do I articulate this in a creative way? And I found that when I used to have a little book, and I would write it down. And then with time, I'll start to, the things that I was learning at school, I didn't even realize that I was practicing, but I would start to apply the same techniques in my poems and when I used to write them down. And I found it as an outlet. You know, it wasn't a diary, it wasn't a secret, because actually I would go and show my mom, or I'll go and show one of my siblings, or, you know, my parents, look what I wrote and how I articulated this and stuff like that. So I started doing that at a very, very young age. But I never really took it seriously. And it's not till I was maybe 17, and one day my mum, it was one of these half-term holidays, and I was just like minding my own business, and my mum gave me a leaflet, and she's like, why don't you apply for that competition? Because you like writing, and you're always writing or typing. You know, we had those big fat computers, and I'll be Hold on, should I really say big fat?
Yeah. What? Since when was that word a crime? Like,
You know, some people take
listen, say what you want, man. Say what you want.
Just,
See, society is mad, you know. Like, you can't even say that word.
freedom
but-
of speech is not freedom of speech
Yeah,
anymore
no,
these days.
It's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
And I don't want you to get any hate
Listen,
comments.
I don't.
I don't want you to get hate
Keep
comments.
Keep going. Keep
Going
keep
back,
going.
you
You're
know,
like a fat computer. Yeah, I see
No,
that,
when
yeah.
there was the big
a big
computers.
a bulky one. They went
The
to the gym.
bulky
They went to the
computers, yeah,
gym.
I think that sounds better. When we had the big bulky computers, and I used to sit there and type for long, and my mum knew I was typing poetry, so I entered this competition. It was a writing competition, and then there was another leaflet for spoken word. So I was like, oh, okay, and I like a challenge in it, and I saw it as a challenge because it's something that I'd never done before. And my mum's like, yeah, go ahead and do it. So I applied, and I got through to the competition, and then I remember the writing one. I had to write a particular theme. So I hadn't developed as a writer yet. So that was quite challenging for me, but I found a way, and I didn't win to have my work. I didn't win the poetry competition, but they wanted to publish my work in this collection of poems. It's like an anthology, and I would be in there. And I was really irritated because they kept spelling my surname wrong. And remember, I'm 17. And they're like, oh, the book costs this amount of money, and you have to pay for the book. So I was like, no, it's an injustice because I've won. That you're gonna have my poem in the book. You keep spelling my name wrong, and on top of that, I'm 17. The least you can do is send me a free copy of the book. Yeah.
Oh wait, so you won, and they wanted to pay for the book.
They still wanted me to pay for the book that would have my poem in. So you're gonna make money off my work.
Yeah.
And the least you can do.
That's mad.
Is send me a copy of the book, so I can be like, this. And I remember kept writing back to them saying, this is how you spell my surname. And I just thought, no. So I didn't give them rights to publish it. I refused because I thought, and the second thing happened because I entered the second year and the same thing happened and I refused. I still got the letter till this day just to show that my work was worthy to be published, but I refused because they wouldn't send me a copy of the book. And then I started doing spoken words in like Fairfield halls and different sort of venues, small venues, big venues. And what was so ironic is that I never realized, or I never expected to receive that type of reception from the audience, because I'm just sitting in my room writing. So when everybody's all clapping and standing up, I'm like, and all the clicks, and I'm like, okay, am I that good? I don't know, because you don't, and I think we are our worst critiques, innit? I'm not sitting here and saying I'm the best spoken word poet. No, I've come across some really excellent ones, and I think the more you watch other people and look at other people's work, the more you develop. But just at that age, I think my confidence was still quite low, and I didn't realise that I could get people clapping for me. I'm in big Fairfield halls and I'm performing. And
But you know what? It's like, you don't realize what's actually inside of you. Like, in the end of the day, I know you're saying you might not be the best spoken word poet, but like, what makes the best spoken word poet? Like, all you're doing is telling people about your story. So
that's
like,
true.
It's about your ability to convey a message. Like, so how can you actually say someone's is better than the other? So like, it's the ability to actually move people, for people to really like get what you're saying or what going through in it, to feel the emotions right there in the room, in it, and that's a skill. So
that's it. I think you articulated really well. Is how do I convey my message and how do I move the audience? And because I'm actually quite a shy person, believe it or not, so when I'm standing on that stage, I'm
the
like,
lies. I'm joking.
I am a shy person, actually. I don't like, it's a weird dynamic because I don't like being center of attention. Yeah, I'm a spoken word artist. It's so weird. But however, for me, I've learned skills through the years, and that's it. You want to engage the audience. You want them to almost feel what you were feeling when you wrote that. And that's what makes, I think, it could be other things, but one of the things that makes you a good spoken word artist is when you can engage the audience and they can almost feel the emotion. Because it takes me back to my childhood when I used to read that poetry, and I could almost, I may not be able to relate with the poem that I was reading, but I could feel what the poet was saying. And spoken word or written word, like poetry, is just like any other creative piece, like an artwork, a painting. Someone might do a sculpture, music. It's just the same. It's like, how do you use grammatical techniques and linguistic techniques to convey that message and capture people and evoke an emotion, if you can, in people? The better you do that, the more you can convey your message in a much more powerful way.
So you lot should be politicians, really, like, because like if you can really influence people like that, like just imagine the sort of spaces you can be in. But like it's so powerful.
It depends what you're into.
Yeah.
I don't think it's like music. I love music, so and I like a really good artist that can I listen down to the beat, how they sample certain music in. So that inspires me when I'm writing as to what message am I trying to convey, and how do I want them, down to the fact when I used to write poems, I would give it to my friends like, when you read that, what do you think I'm saying? Like I used to ask them that to see if they can capture what I'm saying. And it was interesting because it would start a debate. And then in the end, we would all be arguing like, no, I'm the poet. I wrote that. I know what I was trying to say, because they started telling me. But I learned that actually, no, different people interpret things differently, and perception and experience. So that's what also makes, I think, poetry quite dynamic, because it can evoke a really powerful discussion, and people interpret things differently.
Let's go back to the fact that you said that you don't feel comfortable. Well, in general, you say you're shy in it and you're doing poetry in it. So like, how does someone actually like use their fear, shut it off, and be able to actually like perform and deliver their message? Because that's mad. Like it's a mad contradiction what you said. Like you're shy, but you're out there doing spoken word poetry in it. So like, how did you actually get through that? Like, talk me through that.
Well, with me, firstly, my mum was the greatest help, because she used to come and watch me when I was younger, and she used to always say to me, like, okay, when you get shy, because she knew I used to get stage fright. I'd be like, oh, I'm going to be so shy, I'm going to be so shy. And she'd be like, okay, just look at me in the crowds, don't watch anybody else, just focus. When you're speaking, speak to me. And I think what she was trying to do is warm me up to the stage. So she used to be my focal point. And then one day, I was at Fairfield Halls, and all the lights were too bright, and I was looking for my mum in the crowd and I couldn't find her. And I just had to just focus. So what I learned was to deflect. So anyone that's ever been to my spoken words, I always talk before I even start the poem. And what I'm actually doing is deflecting, because I feel so overwhelmed with all the eyes on me, and then I'm standing there and I'm like, I can feel the nerves. People are like, you didn't look nervous. I'm like, I was nervous, I was shaking and everything, but when I deflect, I might say something in the crowd just to engage the crowd. I might bust a joke. I might comment. It just happens naturally, because it's become like a survival technique for me, like to survive that shyness and get past that once. And I could be like that throughout. I might say a sarcastic comment respectfully. I don't know. I just deflect. I deflect for at least 30 seconds, but I do it in such a way that you don't realize I'm deflecting. Now that I've said it, if someone watches myself, they'll be like, okay, she's deflecting. But that's what I will do. And that's also a way of gaining the audience's attention, because sometimes people are like shit and chattering, or they're still appreciating the previous artist, and now you're on stage and you're like, okay, I've got to say what I've got to say. So that's how I've got through that.
But that's powerful though, like even outside of poetry. So like being able to like have all these emotions but still continue, so like you're kind of keeping it contained, buying yourself time and then delivering a message. Like
I like to think I'm a grounded person, so I ground my emotions. Just because I don't appear shy or nervous does not mean I'm not feeling it, but because I'm a grounded person, I've learned with time to just ground the emotion and gauge the moment, just because you're feeling it. And actually you can use that emotion to work for you. So like whenever I've like performed something I think that's quite thought-provoking, or it evokes a particular type of emotion, I can use my emotions. Sometimes I might stop and pause. It just comes natural. I can't even, it's one of those things that it's difficult to explain. And I think you can teach some things and you can like help other people know how to do, but if it doesn't come natural to that person to deflect, then they might go and stand on the stage and try about to joke, and it doesn't work for them, and then now they're more nervous because nobody's laughing. So I think it's one of those things that is, find what works for you. Some people might want to, just do breathing techniques. Some people feel like to just go first and then you just get over and done with it. Some people, eventually it works for them. I don't know.
I was going to ask you that. Like, how do you actually combat that sort of fear? Like, obviously you know what works for you, but like, how would you?
Can I be honest?
Be honest. Like,
I don't think I ever will. I think it's humbling for me. It's there to humble me and to understand that for me, it keeps me grounded. Not that I think highly of myself or anything like that, but it reminds me that, you know what, all of this, you're not doing it in your own strength. But that's what I think for me. Maybe with time I will combat it, but I don't remember a time when I've ever done a spoken word and I have been so comfortable. Even when I've got used to it, because there was an event that was happening once every month, and I had got used to the crowd. I still feel the same. I've done a spoken word behind a screen virtually, and there's 250 people in the room, and I am shaking. I'm just on the other side of the screen. The fact that I know there's 250 people watching me is enough to make me nervous. Yeah, I'm in the comfort of my own home. I'm sitting down. I'm on the other side of the screen, but I'm nervous, and it's because I know it's all the attention's on me. I've never been able to get past that. So I think for me, I've just learned to accept that, okay, this is a humbling. It's to keep me humbled. It's to keep me grounded. It's to develop my skills that, I can still feel this emotion and still deliver. And I think there's something powerful about that as well, because then that's how you really know that, okay, I can ground emotion, because I think in the absence of emotion, it doesn't always mean that you're grounded, because, and some may beg to differ with this, but for me anyway, the fact that I can feel that emotion, but it's not controlling me in that moment. Because I've given some poetry and it's really emotional for me. It's a very emotional poem. And yeah, I haven't cried, but I want to cry because it's so emotional. Because as I said, my poetry is my deepest thoughts. Someone wants to know how I think, just go and read my work. That will let you know how I think. So I'm almost in a vulnerable position right there. So I think some of that fear is just vulnerability. I'm being vulnerable in front of people I don't know, and I'm sharing my deepest thoughts in front of people that I don't know, and they can have whatever thoughts about it. But for me, it's the vulnerability, and so
that's so mad. So good.
Go on.
I was gonna say, like, what you said about being able to control your emotions, not allowing your emotions to control you, like that's mad powerful, man. Like, and there's strength in vulnerability as well, isn't it? So like, yeah, I've never heard someone speak about fear in that way, as a way of like humbling themselves and keeping themselves grounded. But I guess, yeah, in a way, it depends on how you perceive it, innit? Either you see it as a way that, oh, it means I'm gonna flop, or you might see it as that, oh, this means I'm about to do something special. Like, it's just like my adrenaline. Like, in the end of the day, you have that decision to make in terms of like how you label this emotion or how you control this emotion. Like, whether you want to try to take control or whether you want to like let it take control over you, innit?
I think if it took control over me, I might end up crying, and there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes that might be important because it's a very sad poem for you to perform. But then if I allow the emotion to take over me, I might just stop freezing. So
no, but I'm not talking about just poetry. I mean in life, innit? Like, there might be things that you want to do, or whether it's speaking to someone else, either let you down, or you can't let your emotions get the best of you, innit? Otherwise, it might ruin whatever it is that you're trying to say or trying to do, innit? So like, that ability to actually control your emotions is powerful.
Yeah, and I think I think we can't control what we're not aware of. And what helps me, as I said earlier, is I mentalize all my feelings. So if I feel a certain way, so even if somebody offends me in that moment, depending on the offense, sometimes people might say something and they don't intend to offend, or they might do something and it's not direct offense. I have to go away and think about it. Why did they say that? What does that mean? Am I interpreting it wrong? Was I being sensitive? So I have to mentalize the whole thing. And I could be in that mindset for weeks, days, months, depending on how deep it is, depending on what's going on for me at that moment in time. But it allows me to be in tune with my own emotions, because maybe I was just sensitive that day, and what they said made me feel even more sensitive, but they actually had no intention to offend me. In fact, they weren't even aware of it. Or they didn't mean it in that way. Yes, it might help to go back and touch base with them, but we'll be having so many conversations with people on a daily. What did you mean the other day? What was that about? And sometimes it's being able to sit with uncomfortable emotion, because sometimes it's not always intentional. And I think because I'm in touch with my emotions, I'm aware of them, I'm comfortable with them. Some people, I think, are not always so comfortable with their emotions. I'm comfortable with emotions. It's what makes us human. And emotions are a range. It's irritability, it's sad, it's happiness, it's all sorts of things. And because I'm aware of my emotions, and I am aware that I am a sensitive person, I'm sensitive to other people's feelings as well, I'm quite intuitive, I'm able to sit down and mentalize them and realize, oh, this is what I was feeling. And because of that, I can control it. So in a situation where maybe somebody has said something, it takes a lot for me to just react. It takes a lot. I can only count on one hand when I've directly reacted in my adult years. Obviously as a kid, you haven't learned to regulate your emotions, but as an adult, so someone may not even know that they've offended me. I'll go off, I'll have a think about it. If I need to go back and talk to them, I will. Once I've come to a resolve, if I feel like, oh, it's not that deep, or you know what, nah, I don't think they meant it that way, it's just me, leave it.
Well, I think that's the issue. Like, I feel like a lot of people don't actually spend that time to reflect and see whether they were wrong or whether the person was wrong, innit?
Yeah.
Instead, they might let their emotions get the best of them and then they've just reacted or they've gone all guns blazing, innit? Rather than taking that time out. So, like, how common do you think that is, like, for people to not actually reflect? Do you feel like people are making that conscious effort to actually go and, I don't know, sit down in a room and think?
I don't think people are introspective. I don't think not enough people.
You can't be using big words like that here, you know.
Being introspective is similar to being reflective. But there's a difference, I think, with introspection.
Tell them.
So being introspective is obviously looking within. What's going on with me inside?
Yeah.
You can be in that zone for a long time, days, hours, whatever. Yeah. Being reflective, you're still looking within, but maybe it's more objective because you're looking at a situation that's happened. What could I have done differently? Was it me? Was it that person? So there is some introspection involved with reflection, but I think you can still be a bit reflective without being so introspective, because you might not be looking at you inside. You're just looking at the scenario as it happened. Or they did this. Or maybe if I did it this way, it would have been different done. I think not enough people are introspective where they look within themselves and say.
Why do you think that's the case?
I've learned with time to understand that you don't know what you don't know. And having several conversations with people in different situations, I've learned that some people just don't know. They don't know that you have to sit there and, you know, look within and be like, what's going on for me though? And sometimes it doesn't have to be something bad has happened or something triggering. It's just, how many times do people have a time to themselves of solitudeness where they just reflect and be introspective and be like, why am I like this? Or why this? Or why does this upset me? And sometimes I think, you know, some people are, I don't want to use the wrong word here, but are apprehensive about what they might realize, because what you know now, you have to take responsibility of. So if you look inside yourself and you realize, hold on, actually, I'm self-centered. Nah, I'm selfish. What are you going to do with that information? Are you going to now, because I'll go deeper, why am I selfish? What makes me selfish? You know, when you've realized that about yourself, by the way, I'm not saying I'm selfish, I'm just using an example. When you've come to that, what do you do with that now? Because you've got to take some responsibility. Otherwise, you're someone that's aware that you're selfish and you're not doing anything about it. And even you not doing anything about it is you've justified yourself and, yeah, I need to be selfish. But then has that activity been useful for you, or has it just allowed you to identify something within yourself? So I think that sometimes people don't know. They don't realize how much time it takes to be introspective. And sometimes they're apprehensive and worried about what they might realize. And I'm not saying being introspective makes you just realize the bad. I think it makes you realize the good, the bad, and the things that need extra work on.
But that's the thing, like, it can be an uncomfortable feeling. Like, not everyone wants to go through that, because, like, even if they did dig on a surface level, they might realize something and they might not want to go deeper. They might be, oh, that's nonsense. I'm not going to believe that.
Yeah.
But it's so easy to just, like, look at everyone else as a problem. But when you see yourself as a problem, that's a big issue. Like, because, like, in the end of the day, we've all got some sort of, like, pride or ego that we kind of want to live up to. But when you realize that you're at fault, like, it's a whole, like, shaking to your character. You actually have to do something about it. Like you said, it's a responsibility now. But how many people want to admit that they're wrong at times, like, or admit that there are things that they can do to improve. I think, I don't know whether society in general, but in the end of the day, like a lot of us want to hold this sort of like idea as if like we're so like perfect, or we can never do anything wrong, or yeah, they're just not willing to just be open and allow themselves to realize that no one's perfect. I can also improve as well. Like, even you might even hear in some relationships, it's always like the ex, it's always that person. Like, what about you? Like, there's always you. You're the common denominator in that environment, but it's always the other person. You hear men are trash. Okay, cool. Some might be in it, but what are you doing as well in it?
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, why did you go for that person as well? Like,
yeah,
because it works both ways sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah.
But or you're blaming your manager, you're blaming like, it's just always that external view in it. Like, it's always someone else, and like looking at yourself is so uncomfortable. Like,
it is
at
very
times,
uncomfortable.
but at the same time, like you said, you can discover some good stuff as well. But you have to go through the sort of dirt to eventually realize some of the gold that's below, innit? So like, you really have to be willing to search, because just because you found something that is a fault or a weakness of yours, you can turn that to a strength. Like, doesn't mean it's over there, but being able to acknowledge it, I think that's powerful enough.
I think also, like, even being introspective, and then you realize, I think certain things, I think for some people, it could be also just discovering that in itself can be a lot. Like, raw, I'm like this. Why am I like this? And then you notice that, and then you have to do something about it. But then some people realize the root. Someone that's selfish, they're not selfish because, I mean, as human beings, by default, a default setting, we have a level of selfishness in us. And that's a survival thing, right? But then there is that selfishness where it's a bit poisonous, yeah, or toxic, yeah. But that still come from somewhere. And I think sometimes for some people, it's that what makes them uncomfortable is also not wanting to, it's an ego protection, innit? To have to come to terms with, I'm like this, or I struggle with this, and owning that. The biggest person, I feel like one of the greatest commitments we have is to ourselves. That's the greatest commitment you can have, one of, anyway, because you have to live with you. Like, yes, you've got your family, your friends, you can even get married, have a family, but at some point, you still have to deal with you. And if you don't look after you and are aware of you, how do you expect other people to know how to, you know, support you or love you or care for you? I remember I asked a person a question: how does someone love you? How do you receive love? How do you accept love? They couldn't answer the question. And I found that, like, wow, like, you're an adult. You don't even know, you can't define, this is how I feel loved. You don't even know how to define that. And I think that was telling for me. And I have this saying that we all have a way of telling on ourselves unconsciously without realizing. Someone can say something, you've already told on yourself. The fact that this person could not describe to me how they feel loved by people or by a partner, for me, it showed a lot of how much do they know themselves. Or maybe they were just being guarded and didn't want to tell me, and that's fine. But it still goes back to that. It could have been they didn't trust anyone to love them. Maybe they didn't feel lovable. They didn't feel like anyone can really, truly love them. Why? Because maybe they think certain things of themselves. So I think as human beings, we're constantly trying to protect our ego, because facing certain things, it becomes an attack to the ego, and that can be too hurtful. And some people can't deal, and I think that's where the uncomfortability comes from. They can't deal with, I'm actually this person. I'm not who people think I am, and I now have to deal with that. And maybe sometimes it's not that they don't want to, they just don't know how. How do I? And this is why I believe that even in our community, just thinking about the podcast, Melanated, so sorry.
It's cool.
Just thinking about the podcast, like, I think more people in our community, I'm a huge advocate for therapy.